as part of activities to mark the 2023 Africa Day event here in Vienna. The African Union has dubbed 2023 the year of the acceleration of the African Continental Free Trade Area implementation, with the primary goal of growing the nascent African Common Market. As you are aware, the Common Market comprises over 1.2 billion people with a combined GDP of over $3.1 trillion. If COVID has taught us anything at all, it has taught us the need to diversify our economies. And the the Austrian government has shown a strong impetus in diversifying its economy. Africa is the closest to Europe, and anything that happens in Africa affects Europe. Last November, the Austrian government decided to initiate a strategy with Africa in order that we would be able to work hand in hand to enhance our economies. And so it initiated a strategy for Africa, and it's working with the African group in Vienna to develop that strategy. On the heels of that African strategy, which is in evolution, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Federal Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Federal Ministry of European and International Affairs of Austria decided to have this cooperation with us. And so we decided that in the margins of the Africa Day celebration, we would have a very important event, which is themed African Interactive, connecting to Africa past via smart media. The objective of today's press conference is therefore to disseminate information on the project that is aimed at contributing to reduce ignorance and prejudice towards African civilizations, as well as enabling young Africans, those in the diaspora and those at home, to establish deeper connection to their eminent contribution to world cultural heritage. As would soon be elaborated by the eminent Professor Titus Leber, the brain behind this project, Africa Interactive intends to use technology to gather, aggregate, and disseminate African cultural heritage and make this information accessible through smart media to young Africans. It is also intended to preserve our cultural heritage. The African Group is pleased to be associated with this project, which has also received support from the Austrian Federal Ministry for European and International Affairs. I'm glad to mention it quite right this time. It is therefore our expectation that through the press, information on the project would reach a much larger audience. It is now my privilege and honor to invite Professor Titus Leber to deliver a brief presentation on the project, to be followed by questions and answers session. I thank you for your attention.
I would very much like to thank you and the African Group for giving me this wonderful opportunity.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies. Thank you for coming this morning to join me for a brief introduction to what the project Africa Interactive is intended to be. The project actually started. Can you put the light a little bit down here? The project actually started about 7 years ago. When I was traveling for the first time more extensively to Africa, and I was really shocked when I was in Africa for two reasons. The first reason was that I realized how little and to which embarrassingly low level we, the rest of the world, are aware of Africa, of Africa's civilizations, of Africa's great past. And the other point of concern was that I saw that young Africans are in danger to be disconnected from their own past, from their cultural roots. There's a huge Disneyification influence from Western media, which change young Africans' perspective on their own past with smart media, and not always in the best way. So please, without further ado, let me enter in the project and tell you a little bit more how I intend to bring more knowledge, more appreciations into everybody's pocket, because this project is supposed to bring Africa's civilizations, Africa's history, and Africa's great past into the pocket of everybody who has a smartphone, and many young Africans do, and many people in the diaspora internationally do. The project is intended to use state-of-the-art technology to do this, and it is essentially based on 4 pillars, which are the following. First pillar is to use state-of-the-art technology in Africa to set up rapid intervention teams which can collect information, shoot on location whenever there are some ceremonies, wherever living heritage is taking place. There's no point to bring that in from abroad. We must have in major centers of the continent this rapid intervention little photo and film crews with drones, with state-of-the-art equipment to shoot whatever is still happening in terms of living patrimony. A very important point is also to record the living oral tradition, because with every old man who dies, there's an entire library disappearing. It's very important to preserve this speaking and oral heritage. Second point is to match whatever we do on the continent with the vast amount of African artifacts which are disseminated all around the world in collections, and which through this method can, at least in the first step, be virtually restituted, made accessible, to make young people aware to which extent Africa contributed to the world's cultural heritage. The third element is working together with archives, with famous photographers, with people who recorded during the last 100 years in their archives a lot of material which is not any longer available, and to integrate them. And the fourth element is obviously to bring in all the scholars and the wisdom and the internet and the network of international universities, and to make that available. Now, in the past, wisdom and knowledge was essentially transmitted from the elders to the youngers. One gathered around the fire, and the stories about the past were transmitted. Today, this is not any longer viable, and the spark of fire has been replaced by the spark of electricity, and the new medium to convey this is the smartphone. How to navigate such an ambitious project, such a large content as the one from an entire continent. Some people say it's impossible, it's madness to do it. But I found a very beautiful metaphor in Ghana. Ghana has the spider trickster. It's a trickster who goes to the god of the sun and steals from him all stories of the continent, all human stories. And obviously the spider has behind him a net. And it's very interesting how Africa and how Anansi, that's the name of the spider, anticipated by centuries essentially what the internet is. So you could say that the internet is essentially an African invention, a metaphor which was created in Africa. And I dedicate this project somehow to the smart Anansi, who brought all these stories, and I'm using his spider net as a navigational metaphor for the project, in which I also integrate glass beads. Glass beads play a very important role in many African civilizations, and each one of these points, of these glass beads, is an entry point on how to navigate the continent, because there are many ways and many expectations how to navigate the continent. Many people will want to do that in different ways, and I'm going to walk you through several possibilities on how to navigate the continent. The most obvious one would be obviously to start with the people of Africa. We know so little about them, and it's very important, I think, to encounter the people of Africa in the pre-colonial state, in the way Africa was organized before foreigners set their feet on the continent, so you have direct access. And whether the people come from the eastern part, from the old traditional traditions, or very modern, whether they are Muslim, whether they are Christian, whether they are still traditional, adhering to traditional religions, it's very important to understand how the chemistry of this continent is formed, what makes it. And the way to navigate, wouldn't it be nice to understand really what are the traditions, what is standing behind each of these ethnic groups, to explore a little bit more what are their customs, what is their history, what are their belief systems, what is their metaphysical relations, what are their relations with their ancestors. This is just an example here to work to get to know, for instance, words, very small example, the Yoruba, and to bring the whole thing alive. So, whole intention of the system is to immediately give access to live information and to get into visual, sensual accessibility to what each one of these groups, of these many ethnic cultural groups has as its own story, as its thing. Very important, there's another point I'd like to stress. The Yoruba have, for instance, this Ifa oracle system, which they use in daily life, and which is a binary system. It's another way, civilization, which we claim now to be inventions of the Western civilization, was practiced since centuries, since millenniums. You can see there's a binary system, and I'll show you how it works really. These shells, these coconut shells and beans are thrown, and they fall either with the one side up or with the other side down, and it's a binary system which allows you to really interpret according to a code, a very sophisticated code like the Chinese I Ching, the future, and to read the future. Speaking about the Yoruba, and I go very fast because a lot of things to cover, and speaking of bridge builders, we have a very good example of Susanne Wenger, an Austrian artist who became a high priestess of the Yoruba, an initiate and a high priestess of voodoo, and she set up in Nigeria, in Osogbo, these sacred groves, which became, which made it on the list of UNESCO's World Cultural Heritage. And you can see with every picture there are these associational branch outs which go in many directions and make it interesting for you to explore at your own leisure, at your own rhythm, whatever is connected to this content. These are some of the very famous statues from Susanne Wenger. They are partly 30 meters high. This is her before, when she was already a high priestess of the Yoruba. And associatively, we can go to another person who is a big bridge builder between Austria in this case and Africa in general. It's the photographer and collectioner Gerd Casey, a great traveler in Africa, who has been for 40 years around, bringing us the beauty, the sensual access to the continent, to its people. And I find it always so recomforting in our grey and sad and hectic world if we have a touch of these people who have nothing, who have really nothing, who are so poor and who live for beauty and who seem to enjoy life in a simple way. And always I find it amazing to discover Africa from this warmness of its people, from the gentleness of its people also. And at the same time, Gerd Casey is a great photographer of art. He was a great collectioner, and you see the quality of material we want to integrate in the project. Another way to travel the continent is by its great traditional commercial roads, the rivers and the caravan roads. And we can touch any of the rivers, this whole thing will be touch screen. And there we are, flying along with a drone, the major rivers. And if we see, like here in the center, a point which could be possibly of interest, we touch it, we are there instantly, in this case in Mali, from where we can go to an overview of the main pillars which constituted the key points and the key events marking a country, a civilization. So the idea is really to build a large number of micro-projects, we call them micro-projects, which give you a first entrance to the key elements which constitute each cultural circle. Like in this case, for instance, for Mali, the famous emperor Mansa Musa, who crossed the Sahara on his pilgrimage to Mecca, the richest man of all times, who went out with caravans, 60,000 people in the Middle Ages to cross the Sahara. From here we can go to African history, which begins tens of thousands of years ago with the rock paintings. We go to Egypt. Many people, for some reason, exclude Egypt is not part of Africa. For some reason, it's in another box here. Egyptian civilization played obviously a very, very important role, as did Meroe with its pyramids, and it's often said that the world's civilization came from Egypt and had its sources there. Not to forget the eminent African empires in the Middle Ages. When Europe was still in the dark ages of the Middle Ages, Africa had flourishing empires, kingdoms, and there will be a possibility to travel through these different kingdoms. But most importantly, what I found amazing is Africa has heroes, great heroes, and I never understand the need. Why do we need Superman? Why do we need a Disneyification in Africa when Africa has its own heroes and should express their stories in Africa's own language and through their own view? Please don't put up these Disney glasses to look at your own history, especially also at the great women who shaped Africa's history. There's a large number of great empresses, queens, liberation fighters from all parts, from Burkina Faso, from Angola, from Ghana, who were important women who really shaped, very importantly, history. Another way, and a very obvious way to navigate the continent, is to do by countries. For many people, Africa is just a big amorph shape, and with this feature you'll have the possibility to navigate through the continent, see what are the names, what are the flags, and go directly from here again to each one of the countries and enter through the little projects, the key projects into the history of each country. One of the countries where I worked a lot was Senegal, and each country has its own navigational metaphor, like here the baobab, which reminds us of a neuron, and from here interactively we can go right away into Dakar into its main museums, which still look a little bit like that. That's the conventional way a museum presents itself. The way we propose to do it is take each single artifact, click on it, get an understanding in which context it is, and here we go, and we are back into the living patrimony of each country. Very interesting in Burkina Faso, they have every 2 years a major mask festival which reunites the masks of all Western Africa, initiation masks, like in this case. Beautiful, the leaf masks, the young men who are initiated go in the forest, are dressed up there, meet their ancestors. Very rare material we have here of the dressing up of a young initiate, and then come to the village and keep on the tradition living. A fantastic example of this rare masks dances is also the night masks, also from Burkina Faso. Very dramatic masks. Let you watch for a second their dance. Okay, and here you see the cross-reference how cultures interpenetrate. On the left side, the mask from Burkina. On the right side, a picture from Cocteau's Le Testament d'Orphée. I wonder who stole from whom. In any case, this intercultural penetration is very important. Another place of great interest in Senegal is this newly opened Museum of the African Civilizations, built by Chinese, by the way, which has a beautiful collection of Benin bronzes. But when I saw these collections, I asked the museum, wouldn't it be nice to immediately interconnect with all the other Benin bronze collections around the world? And when you touch the little globe on top, you have immediate access, or you should have in the developed version, to any collection in America, in Europe, in London, in Berlin, in Vienna for that matter, and within seconds you are in Vienna, in the Völkerkunde im Weltmuseum with the Benin bronzes. So here I would like to open a short parenthesis on the big restitution campaign we have at the moment. And it's a very hot topic, as we know. Last year we had a visit in Vienna by Achim Bembe. He's one of the great intellectuals of the continent. He's known as one of the inventors of the restitution concept. And I had a chance to befriend him, to show him my project, and he said, went right on the stage and declared that virtual restitution, as it is presented here in this project, takes for him as important a place as the physical. It should not fight against each other. Physical and virtual restitution should complement each other, should work together, because virtually we can obviously make this African cultural heritage accessible to many, many more millions, hundreds of millions of people than only bringing the physical stuff back to Africa, which is very important, obviously, but the two means should complement each other. And here's a brief example just of the quality, what we can do and what we do at the moment here in Austria with the Austrian collections, private collections of African art. That's the initiative I set up, which is called Africa Interactive, is, as a matter of fact, working with a great number of Austrian private collections to give an access to material and to artifacts which are otherwise not accessible. And here is one example of the Liaonic collection, fantastic museum in Carinthia, which has one of the largest Akam gold collections. Here's just a very brief overview of what they have, and things how we never see them in the museum because we are not allowed to approach the artifacts. They're behind glass, but here we can show them in full beauty and have a completely different, much closer contact with them, obviously, than in the real physical setting. So the way we navigate these collections is we scroll through all their different objects, and once we find an object which calls for our interest, we can go on a close-up, and then we have two options. The first one is eye information, that gives you the classical museum information about provenience and measurements, etc. But more important is this little spider, and here we are back at the navigational metaphor of Anansi, of the spider, which allows us to go directly and link the object, like in this case the Ashanti court, and it's fascinating to link so easily objects and real living cultural heritage like here. Very important thing is, here we can also go to the country in which the whole thing is happening, Ghana in this country. Very important element is that we speak a lot of this Internet of Things here. But imagine that instead of things, fridges or cars or garages or dimmers in the light, we would enable each one of these African objects with its own intelligent and smart connectivity. We could build an ANSYS network between all the objects of Africa, and there are so many ways in which objects can talk to us, which is a way which leads us directly to the metaverse, which is going to be the next step, how to navigate through the digital space in 3D and in an associational way. And you can see how young people will love it. Yeah? A brief look, very brief look to some of the other important collections in Austria, the Schöngrundner collection. We have downstairs a little photo exhibition where Mr. Schöngrundner, who has a large collection brought back from his 30 crossings of the Sahara of artifacts from all over West Africa, exposes his things, and you can see again the quality of 3D, how it lights almost like in a movie, and how it brings alive the different characters and every object which is otherwise difficultly or not at all available. Just some examples what we do in 3D at the moment here in Austria. The Steppich collection, another fantastic collection, very, very rich bronzes and metal objects, and you see, can see it's exquisite pieces, which are all hidden away in boxes, by the way. You cannot see them in a museum. They're all in a vault in which doesn't make a lot of sense. I've suggested to create in Vienna a museum of all the African art, because we are with our past a little bit more neutral towards Africa. Would be a fantastic place to do that. Another fantastic museum is the Museum Humanum in Fratres. And just to give you an idea how we find currently African art, I've discovered within the last 4 months at least 4,000 pieces of African art hidden away in private apartments, and the way we bring them to the public is this, just like this now. So this is already treated now in 3D. We are back to the spider web. And a last word, as this material, as this seizing in 3D is exponentially growing, we have an interesting development. AI stands for Africa Interactive, but with this exponential growth, we have another factor entering the field, which is another AI, artificial intelligence. And if you cross the power of Africa Interactive with this huge and ever-growing image bank, and you multiply that with the possibilities of artificial intelligence, you're going to have all new and fantastic possibilities to work into the past and to do amazing things with Africa's culture and heritage, which will bring us much more to eye level, because foreigners will better understand what Africa is about. Africans will learn to better appreciate and be more proud on their own past. And this brings us essentially to AI to the third, which is Africa Interactive, multiplied by artificial intelligence, multiplied by African identity. Let me close on a more poetic note. In the European civilizations, we had the 9 muses, which inspired the arts and the sciences, but it seems that one muse was missing, the one of the digital media. And so my suggestion would be, why shouldn't she come from Africa? And the name I would give to her is Digitalia, and I hope the 10th muse will come from the African continent. Happy birthday, Africa Interactive. Thank you.
I am the president of the UNO United Nations Correspondents Association, and originally I'm from Sudan. So I was very happy and pleased to see the pyramids of North Sudan. But you mentioned Egypt, South Sudan, but anyhow, in North Sudan there is more pyramids than in Egypt, and we think that the idea of pyramids started from North Sudan. I was honored also to speak with Professor Lever about his projects, and when I went to Sudan, I was taking all these ideas of that project, speaking with the people in different levels. Besides the idea of the Austria house in Sudan, because we got or received from the government of Sudan a land which is 2,000 square meter, worth more than $2 million. But unfortunately, since 1.5 months, the war started in the capital of Sudan, destroying every cultural, industrial, healthy, educational unit. So this is really the sad news which I can bring you now, because we've never met since last year. But anyhow, I will be very happy if these ideas and these projects could be realized in Ghana or in other countries. So with all the information, all the experience we have, anyhow, we support you. Thank you very much.
To work with every part of Africa, with everybody who is interested. And I would like, and I strongly advocate, that this project becomes a project by Africans for Africans. What we can contribute is technical know-how, whatever I've shown you in terms of navigation, but it's very, very important that we work together with the local governments, with the local intelligentsia, with the people, and I've suggested to set up a board, an advisory board of the best brains of Africa, style of Senghor, people like him, and we should form, like in the old times, the sages were sitting around the fire discussing the matters, what really matters. We should come at the heart of the African Union, why not, to a cultural board, because culture is completely underrepresented at the African Union. There's all kind of economic and political boards, but let's encourage that there we will form also a cultural board. Please.
Today we're celebrating the 60th anniversary of the African Union. Well, I would like just to tell you that it's an interesting project, but how you see, how you will proceed, I mean, to make this project more alive, because it's the first time that we heard about this Interactive Africa. You propose this idea of cultural advisory board. I think it's a good idea, but also you have the opportunity to promote this project at UNESCO, because you know UNESCO is an institution dealing with culture, and I think that it would be much better to have contact with African group there, to maybe to promote this project which of course, because the important objective is to appropriate this project. It will belong to Africa, because it shows what Africa has in terms of cultural, economic, and I think that UNESCO will be a good place where we can promote this interactive Africa. Thank you.
As a matter of fact, UNESCO was the first organization to which I extended the hands and said, let's work together. And UNESCO in Paris has very actively, as a matter of fact, the Africa group, whose representative sends his warm greetings. He wanted, Dr. Omar Keita wanted to come today, but unfortunately couldn't make it. A very important point you make is sustainability, obviously. Yeah? And sustainability comes with money, because I mean the project needs to get foundations, to get even a small foundation, which later can be built up. That's why I've suggested to start with 5 pilot countries in Africa, 1 for each region. And I believe if we could set up these 5 pilot projects over the next 3 to 5 years, then we would get kind of like a snowball effect, if I could say, because the other would follow. And obviously, a project like this can only set standards on how it should be done, and then it has to be taken over and expand, and so. But sustainability is very, very important. And unfortunately as well, UNESCO, the different governments in Africa with whom I had the chance to talk so far, they love the project, but nobody has given one single dime so far. So today I'm also asking you to please convey to your governments, enter the project, become part of it, become pilots. You're welcome, and we'll be very happy.
I would like first to thank you about this very interesting presentation. I do believe that this project was not easy to do it, and we encourage you to I don't want to say that to ameliorate it, but to give more information, because, you know, as you mentioned, African culture is oral. It's very important to mention it. We encourage you as Algeria to go ahead and to give you more information about to ameliorate your project, and to be more and more interesting, you know, because oral culture is difficult to manage, to take it in one project. So thank you very much, and we congratulate you to do all this work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, the Embassy of Egypt, and I would like to thank you very, very much for this extremely interesting presentation. I think it's definitely a project worth appreciation and commendation, and definitely I also want to commend your important reference that, you know, Egyptian history is part and parcel of African history, and it should be only construed as such, always taken from that perspective, and so we thank you for that. Whether with regards to the pyramids that my dear brother from Sudan also mentioned, that his country has many beautiful pyramids as well. So this is extremely interesting, and they all tie to the rich and diverse history of our beautiful and beloved continent. So I'd like to thank you for this project. We definitely sincerely appreciate this work, and I will personally try and join tonight and try and scour the rest of the continent for the very interesting history there. Thank you.
Talk, and my name is Diana Motnamako from the Editor-in-Chief of iCloud News. I just wanted to clarify, so the funding so far has been from the Republic of Austria, and also do you intend to expand this project of yours to include other areas like the effects of climate change in Africa?
Well, Recently, over the last year, basically, Austrian governmental agencies like the Foreign Ministry and the Ministry of Culture have entered also and started to support the project. But I mean, it's droplets in the bucket, and we have to look to all possible fundings. Yeah? The one thing which is very important is I want to keep this project out of political, religious, commercial influence spheres. Yeah? I had a number of offers from private sources, but there was always strings attached, and I want to keep this a non-profit and basically a neutral project, so that's very important. But obviously the issues you are talking about, environmental, also bringing in the ancient knowledge of African wise men. I had the chance to visit so many wise men, spiritual doctors, voodoo priests. I must say voodoo has two sides, a positive and the negative side, a white and a black side like our magic. But those who are doctors in the bush and who know the old herbs and the old wisdom, there is an enormous amount of knowledge we have not access to. And I'm in discussion even to set up a research institute in Togo about paranormal phenomena. And these things will definitely enter in the field here.
And history, importance of heritage of African countries. My question, just I have one small question. What are your possibilities or your prospects for developing your project and giving it greater interaction, especially that there is importance, initiative and project in many African countries?
To work with selected countries, and it's to them to come basically to say that we are interested, and all countries should be ultimately integrated. And personally, I had the chance mostly to work in Western Africa, but I'm extending, I'm looking forward to come to all parts as much as my time permits, and the idea is obviously to extend it to every single country.
To join us. The sustainability of this project is not only financial. Africans would have to show a much more interest in this project. African historians, archaeologists, etc., policymakers, and so on. Beginning from the missions here, we have to show interest in the project. It's work in progress, it is evolving, and African historians would also have to tell the story of Africans. And so when they join with Professor Leber, this can be a reality, and we will be able to sustain this. When Professor Leber would speak to us once again about the Africa Interactive, and we would celebrate our 60th independence, 60th anniversary of the AU. You are most welcome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.